quick reminders. I think everybody's pretty familiar with it at this point, but just in case. Just a quick reminder that audience participation is prohibited. I've said this so many times today, it's spelled jumbled. But we do absolutely encourage some light parliamentary tapping, tapping on your tables, some great support for our debaters. Please refrain from leaving the room until the debate is completed and the competitors have left. And please refrain from using electronic devices. Anyone who is being disrupted will be dealt with by the JDC West staff at our discretion. Time will be kept by the official timekeeper. The start and end of protected time, as well as the beginning of the 2-minute rebuttal period from the Leader of Opposition, will be indicated by 1 slap on the table. The end of each speech will be indicated by 2 slaps on the desk with no grace period. A time will be shown to indicate 30 seconds remaining, and 10 seconds remaining will be indicated with an arm gesture here. I'll be your Speaker of the House today, and I will be directing the proceedings. And without further ado, I would like to now call the round to order. This round will feature Team C, debating side government, and Team B, debating side opposition on the resolution that we're before you. And I'd like to call the Prime Minister to open the debate.
All right, thank you, Madam Speaker. And it's my pleasure to open house today on an issue that's tremendously important to ensuring that Canada has a strong corporate sector, a vibrant economy, and a successful corporate culture for many years to come, and that's the issue of whistleblowers. As Prime Minister, I'm going to do a number of things for you today. I'm going to start by outlining the status quo. What's going on right now with whistleblowers? How are they treated in the workplace, and how can we make it better? Then I'll lead you through why side government thinks this needs to change and why we're even having this debate today. Then I'll talk about what side government proposes to do today, a plan that we're very excited to bring forward. And then I'll bring forth the first of our 3 constructive cases. My portion will center around the economy and why this is going to create a more stable and reliable economy for many years to come. My second member is going to talk about the social implications. How do we create a healthy corporate culture? And my final member will talk about the legal ramifications and why we need to pursue this resolution. But to begin, I'd actually like to start off with one very important definition, and that is obviously the definition of a whistleblower. For the purposes of this debate, we're defining that as any employee of a company who reveals previously unknown criminal wrongdoing. We think that the fact that the company will be found guilty is implied in the resolution, but that is another component of the debate. Moving through to status quo, what's happening right now? Why are we talking about this? Why are we here? Right now, side government feels that corporate regulatory bodies don't have sufficient capacity and are having trouble getting information on corporations that are cheating the Canadian regulatory system. And we see that a lot of potential crimes that would be punished are going unpunished. We feel this is quite problematic on side government. And we also see that potential whistleblowers are faced with bribes to stay quiet, they face the risk of being fired, and they face the risk of breaking collective responsibility with the rest of their employees. Employees are part of a team, and they feel that they're betraying their whole side if they come forward as a whistleblower. And side government sees this as a need for change because, first off, we want to have a stable and reliable economy. We don't want corporations that cheat the system to have any degree of success. Next, we think that it's important that we have an ethical corporate culture. This has a lot to do with sustainability and ensuring that the Canadian private sector continues for many years to come under the watchful eye of the Canadian government in a way that's sustainable for years to come. Yes?
Mr. Speaker, I was wondering if side government believes that ethical decisions completely align with monetary value.
Madam Speaker, ethical decisions align with the Canadian government's legislation, and the punishments are a part of that. It's part of the regulatory system we have in Canada. So what is side government going to do for you today? What is our plan that we're so excited about? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to follow what the resolution says. We're going to give 1 to 5% of the reward as a reward of a financial penalty to the whistleblowers that reveal the corporations that do wrongdoing, and this is to be decided by the investigative body. And it'll be based on the size of the corporation and the size of, or the magnitude of the crime committed. And the reward will remain anonymous so as to not explicitly identify these individuals to, again, encourage further whistleblowing. Moving into our first constructive case, the first reason that we really think this is an important issue we're talking about and why our plan is the best way to solve it, and that's the economic case for side government today. Side government believes that it's the best option for the Canadian government to prevent future crimes. We think that learning how crimes are currently being committed is the best way to prevent against them being committed in the future. We think that when we understand what crimes are being committed by whistleblowers telling us, we can get better legislation, and if we have a better corporate culture, we can actually even lead to less legislation potentially, and the structural integrity of the Canadian economy will be increased. An example of where this might be relevant would be, for example, about a decade ago with the case of Enron, for example. Where they cheated the markets, they lied about their profits, they manipulated effectively every single stakeholder they had. It gave us new ideas for regulation and it helped prevent repeats. And that's what we want to do with this resolution. We want to prevent the next Enron from happening. Moreover, we also think that we can correct small wrongdoings. That's why we're happy with our plan. We think that if a company isn't committing a massive crime like Enron, that we can perhaps correct it and get it on the path to stability, and then we don't have to destroy corporations when we don't need to. Think of a company that doesn't understand the rules between contracted employees and in-house employees. That's a simple error that we can correct, but we need a whistleblower to tell us that that error is being made, and then we can save the company and have it obey the law for many years to come and employ people and contribute to the Canadian economy. So what have I told you? I've told you that right now the Canadian corporate sector is facing a threat. We think that whistleblowers and corporate wrongdoing are not receiving the treatment they need to. Side government thinks we need to work towards a more stable and ethical economy, and I told you the economic benefits of today's plan. So, Madam Speaker, let us support an ethical Canada.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I now call the first member of opposition to the podium.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Side Government, for your points and your plan. Now, I agree with Side Government that we're here today to discuss an important issue. That this House, be it resolved, this House would award whistleblowers a percentage of the financial penalties as a result of their testimony. But before I get into my deconstruction of Side Government's points, and my points that Side Opposition and my esteemed Doug are bringing up, I want to ask you a question. And the question simply is this: should we be encouraging distrust among Canadians? Madam Speaker, I believe a large number of people in this audience would answer no. Now, Madam Speaker, Side Government came up here and they told you that they want to encourage a healthy corporate culture. They want to encourage strong business practices. Now, Madam Speaker, if employees of a company are actively encouraged to whistleblow through a monetary award of 1 to 5%, like Side Government believes they should be, then this will increase distrust in corporations, as it will give employers the idea that their employees have a monetary award at that to whistleblow on them. Would you not agree?
But Madam Speaker, isn't the best way to get to a healthy corporate culture by breaking down bad practices when we learn about them from whistleblowers we need to encourage?
Now that's a great question, and I'm actually going to go into that in my first point, which you brought me to. Now, my 3 points today are 1, legitimacy, 2, the moral dilemma, and finally 3, the internal conflict. Now 1, legitimacy, and I will answer your question now. These people who whistleblow are often not trained or do not lack the expertise to decide whether fraud has actually occurred. Therefore, we should not be actively encouraging these people to come forward with many cases in which fraud has not actually occurred because of the fact that we are giving them monetary rewards. What this does, Madam Speaker, is it gives the government the ability to say that we believe that all corporations are guilty of some sort of fraud, and therefore we are actively encouraging people to come forward to whistleblow in the companies, and this again creates distrust among employers and employees, and once again ruins the healthy corporate structure that Side Government seems to push for. Would you not agree?
But Madam Speaker, won't these decisions of whether or not this is a legitimate claim be handed over to the regulators, and they certainly won't be rewarded unless this leads to prosecution? Won't we see this will only persecute those who have committed crimes?
And again, we do not disagree with this. What we disagree with is the principle of actively encouraging employees to look for ways where fraud has occurred in the company through a monetary reward. Madam Speaker, what this does, it gives the company, or it gives the government the impression of asking employees to actively look for places where fraud has occurred in order for them to get a monetary reward. Madam Speaker, this goes against the principle that people and companies are innocent until proven guilty. I will not take your question. And again, what we want to stress is that many people who come forward as whistleblowers do lack the expertise to decide whether fraud has occurred. And we agree that many whistleblowers, and in many cases, such as the Enron scandal, did not know that fraud had occurred, but came forward anyway, and it was found that the fraud did occur. However, by doing this, we are actively encouraging these people to come forward. We are actively encouraging employees to look for places where fraud has occurred, to look for places where they believe wrongdoing has occurred, when they have no expertise to know whether wrongdoing has occurred. What this does, this creates a huge process whereby companies are investigated, companies have the reputations ruined, and quite frankly, employees and employers have their lives ruined. Just because an employee want that monetary reward, just because an employee wanted that monetary reward, and my esteemed delegate will go into the facts on how the current status quo, whereby whistleblowers come forward because of a moral obligation they feel they have to report on the wrongdoing of their business, is a much better practice than providing them with this monetary incentive. Now, again, I want to touch on my main point that I'm going over, which is the legitimacy of this. What we are doing by providing a monetary reward, Madam Speaker, we are essentially creating professional whistleblowers. We're essentially making it a profession to whistleblow. Now, why is this wrong? They mentioned the figure of 1 to 5%. Madam Speaker, if a large-sized corporation is fined $1 billion because they committed fraud, do you understand how much 1% to 5% of $1 billion could be? Madam Speaker, we are creating not only a professional whistleblower, but quite a lucrative profession at that.
Does it mean?
I will not take your question at this time. What we believe is that we are making professional whistleblowers, these professional whistleblowers, into fraud investigators when we already have fraud investigators. If the government has reasonable belief that fraud is going on, or if they have a reasonable tip from an employee, a whistleblower, that fraud is going on, we have fraud investigators in place to investigate this fraud, to figure out whether fraud has actually occurred. And it is the job of these fraud investigators to decide whether fraud has actually occurred. If the government is so worried about corruption and bad business practices in Canada, should they not invest this money, these quite honestly tens of millions of dollars that they might be given out to professional whistleblowers, and rather invest that in fraud investigators and in more stringent regulations and investigations so they can find these malpractice in business without needing to pay whistleblowers so much, without needing to create a monetary incentive for whistleblowers, without needing to create the profession of a whistleblower, whereby many employees who lack the expertise to actually decide whether fraud has happened or not will therefore go ahead anyway and report such fraud, which may not have happened or not, to the authorities just because they believe they can get a reward, which, as we said, can ruin lives and can create distrust among companies, which will affect that healthy corporate structure or healthy corporate culture which side government seems to be pushing for. Madam Speaker, what I went through today, let me tell you, I went through the deconstruction of the points, how by providing a monetary incentive, it is actually not encouraging healthy business practices, it is encouraging unhealthy business practices, whereby I also counter that by saying, by having fraud investigators that are not professional whistleblowers, we can find these business practices that are not going well without needing to create distrust among Canadians and create a not good corporate culture. Madam Speaker, it comes back to our final question. Should we encourage distrust among Canadians, and should we encourage distrust among Canadians through monetary gains? No, Madam Speaker, that is not the way this is done in Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, first member of opposition. I'd like to call the first member of government to the podium.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. So what I'm going to do for you today is, first of all, I'm going to clash what actually has been said with side opposition's first speaker, specifically pertaining to some of the very, very strenuous allegations he's made in his previous speech that need to be thoroughly examined to see that there is actually some critical flaws in side opposition's analysis today. Second of all, what I'm going to do for you is introduce the second argument inside government's case that deals with the cultural and social aspect found in corporations today, and how what side government's measure will do was in fact reduce the harm that some of them actually cause to whistleblowers today. So beginning off with the clash, side opposition's essential main point here and how they countered rather poorly the first government member's speech was that what we are suggesting would create distrust among Canadians, would create a sort of breeding of distrust within corporate culture, something that they don't want to happen. But in fact, this is something that we need to be very vigilant in terms of wording, that this is wordplay and this is not actually the reality. We don't need to distrust other Canadians. If companies are not doing anything wrong, they have nothing to fear from the measures that side government are introducing today. If a company is acting within the law and is ethically responsible to the extent we expect them to be, then they have nothing to fear from what side government is introducing. And other side opposition's point, under their model, would we simply leave day-to-day crimes, let it go, because we don't want to create distrust? We don't want to tell the police, we don't want to tell anyone, because we don't want to create distrust within the community? Absolutely not. People whistleblow all the time. Outside of corporations, in day-to-day life, people go to the regulatory bodies that they need to inform them about crimes that may or may not be occurring. Yes?
It's just, Madam Speaker, if side government believes that people are already whistleblowing, then why do we have to financially incentivize them if the status quo holds true?
Thank you very much. In my speech, I'll go on further to analyze why, in fact, whistleblowing needs to be encouraged, and why it's not encouraged enough. In fact, it's not incentivized enough. In fact, why cases like Enron and even Nortel occur far more often than they should be allowed to. Moving on. Even if people go forward, even if we have more people who go out to these companies, who go out and try to find ways that their companies are being dishonest or are cheating the law, is that really worse than status quo, under the current status quo, and then not doing anything? Then letting Nortel happen again? Then letting Enron occur again and again and again? Seeing thousands of people lose their jobs over the inefficiency of a single individual who is incapable of following ethical and moral standards that he's been held to? Absolutely not. What we see is that we need to encourage this, because if we don't, the opposite to this is doing nothing. And that is frankly the wrong methodology to take. We need more people to come forward, because as side opposition even said, regulatory bodies require tips. And the greatest place for tips to come from is from whistleblowers from within a company. People who know what's going on. People who know that these companies are doing the unethical thing. Yes.
Madam Speaker, isn't there a concern when said tips are incentivized by financial reward?
Thank you very much. Again, I'm going to go into this on my speech regarding corporate social culture, regarding culture found within corporations today and how they act. And in fact, that's a perfect segue into my argument. What we find in corporations today is that there is incentive not to whistleblow. People have jobs, have families, have needs, for example, education, that they need to fund through their jobs. Would they risk losing that simply to tell regulatory bodies that the company that they're working for is doing something wrong? No, they wouldn't want to risk something like that. They would feel pressured not to. For example, in the case of Nortel, many employees were coerced by a single manager who went around threatening their jobs if they told regulatory bodies as to what was going on. Fear for their financial security, fear for the safety of their future is something that motivates many, many people not to whistleblow. And we do see time and time again cases like Nortel, cases like Enron occurring because of this fear. Side government's plan would remove that from the corporate culture we have today. Side government's plan would give a safety net of sorts to those individuals who can get that 1%, that 2%, that 5%, to have that safety, to get the ability to protect their own financial security, to protect their own interests when they go out and speak. But even if we play with side opposition's model and say that people will actively seek out, will become professional whistleblowers, again, isn't that more better to encourage that people self-regulate their own companies? That we don't have to go out time and time again and ensure that our major corporations throughout Canada are doing the right thing? Yes, we agree. Maybe more regulators are also a good thing. But whistleblowers are an amazing part of it too. Like side opposition conceded, they do give tips to regulatory bodies. Regulatory bodies can't investigate a company if they don't know something is going wrong. what our model does is it gives people who already have a good conscience to want to do something the safety net. And it also incentivizes those who care only about they're only care about their own financial gain. So we see that it is this double-edged sword. So what we see is that it also encourages our foreign relations. Companies, for example, Canadian mining giants in El Salvador have been boycotted because of lack of human rights issues, because they haven't regulated themselves properly. And that affects our international relations, our ability to work and be fielded on an international stage. So what have I in fact told you today? I've told you that there is no creation of distrust. Rather, there is a greater self-regulation of companies and individuals. What I've told you is that the corporate culture today, as it stands, encourages people not to whistleblow, even to their own detriment, because fear for financial security and their own safety. What I've told you today is that we need to encourage whistleblowers, because more whistleblowers is better for a safer and more secure Canadian financial system. Thank you.
Thank you, first member of government. I'd like to call the second member of opposition to the podium.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Now, before I go into my debate, I'd like to just quickly outline what I'm going to be talking about today. First, I'll be going over the resolution very quickly, and I'll be going quickly into the status quo.